I suppose we could start the webinar. And so, in a formal way, very good afternoon to everybody who has joined, and especially to the speakers who have kindly consented to join. And when the webinar team, and I'm sorry, before I say anything, I would like to apologize if there's some noise in my background. I'm in a public space. Unfortunately, had to come for a meeting in one of these ministries, so I had to kind of find a refuge somewhere, but still it is not private. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, when the webinar team came up with this idea of running a webinar with the journalists, it was, I mean, the first immediate response from, I think, me and Pranshu, the founder of 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗶𝗂𝗵𝗂, we were like, absolutely right on, let's go do it. It's one of the best ideas that you've come up with. So thank you very much for what you are truly, and for also accepting an invitation and joining us today. As I say that, this is the sixth episode of our fourth season. Am I saying it right? No, the fifth episode of the fourth season of Decoding Circularity, and this one is about the narrative of e-waste. And the what has happened is that this webinars have always been there have been a bunch of our clients who have supported us running these webinars, and we would like to take the opportunity to thank our clients, which are Apple, Dell Technologies, Canon India, Cisco, Ericsson, Tejas Networks, Boat, and the brand Nothing. So we are very, very thankful to them, and because of them, we're able to run these webinars, build on these webinars, and create awareness among the masses. And as I say, I just loosely said that create awareness among the masses, but then that's what all of you do. Journalism, as we always talk about, the first thing, one of the first things that we always do in the morning is look at the news, and you shape the news. And sometimes it is taken in a very cliched way, but then what we build in our minds as to what's happening around us, what's happening around the world, is all from what you guys tell us as to what is happening. And sometimes when you look at the lives that you lead, the kind of risks that you put yourself into, and the fervor with which you go and attack a certain topic and attempt to bring out the truth in the topic and bring it to us, present it to us in the way you present it to us, we are absolutely, I guess, obliged to all of you in many ways for letting us know and giving us that insight. And you've done that not with respect to all kinds of news, but in our case in particular, we're thankful for the way you brought out the information and also the awareness of what's happening with this hidden thing of e-waste, what's happening in the world, what is happening in India, and how you brought forward the informal realities, the systemic gaps, and you have lived the experience of the people. I mean, we have known some of you or your colleagues who have lived in those societies, lived in those spaces for months on end, weeks on end, months on end, to give the information, to bring out the information to the world. So thank you very much for that. What we will try to understand in today's session is the insights from you all, the challenges, confusions, and the breakthrough moments, and also how the narrative has evolved over the years. And now, having said that, how is this going to move forward? How is this e-waste story going to move forward in India? That's the point that we will go to. So the way we will do it is going to be a panel discussion. Shivangi from 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗂𝗶 will be moderating the panel. And of course, the panel Shivangi will be giving you some prompters. Definitely, there's going to be space for each of you to converse and build on each other's points and go forward. And we definitely have an incredible panel today, and I'm kind of wanting to compliment my own team. At the same time, I also want to thank you once again for bringing Ms. Pankaj Mishra, Ms. Simrin, Sirur, Mr. Aroon, Deep, and Ms. Sneha and Bhura to this panel. So thank you very much once again for being here. Before we jump to the panel, of course, we have our opening speaker, a keynote speaker, I should say. We have the pleasure of having Dr. Thomas Chandy. We had just a chit chat a little while back, and clearly I was envious of him for having lived in Sikkim one of the most beautiful spaces on earth that I've ever seen. So that is really, really great. And then what better to be in Sikkim than being the member secretary of the Pollution Control Board and then later on the chairman of the Pollution Control Board. I mean, he has protected that environment. He has given us that environment the way God created it. He has helped us maintain it for us, all of us, to enjoy and that. So thank you very much, sir, for being what you were and being here with us to share your experiences in that space. Mr. Dr. Chandy, please, over to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Mani and the Karo Sambhav team. I thank you profusely once again for inviting me to open this webinar on the narrative of e-waste with a focus on journalists and their role in e-waste management. We actually need many more such webinars and discussions because e-waste is something which is, first of all, as I think Mr. Mani was saying, a hidden waste, not as apparent as solid waste is. At the same time, it is pretty dangerous to the environment and therefore to the foundations of life. And therefore, we need to dispose of electronic waste wisely and in a scientific manner. Therefore, I think this webinar is a very important one, and I think there should be many more such webinars and discussions, and not just involving a few mainstream media journalists, but also maybe incorporating journalists from the regions, from the states, and local language media representatives, because I will be talking about one term that you would probably hear a few times when I speak, which is the vastness of e-waste generation landscape in India. I've always said this for all waste, not just e-waste, but then definitely for e-waste also, the vastness of e-waste generation landscape in India. And given the widespread landscape that we have in India for e-waste that is being generated, we need journalists of all hues and from all nooks and corners of the country to be brought into discussions like this. I'm sure many of them have good ideas as well, but I think it's important for journalists to play an important part in this whole thing. And therefore, I think today's webinar, as Mr. Mani was pointing out, is something spot on, something that is absolutely required under the circumstances. Now, India has had a phenomenal economic growth post-COVID, and the country is, as you know, is poised to become the third largest economy of the globe, behind US and China in a couple of years' time. The ambitious $5 trillion economy, which government of India has been speaking about for the past several years, I think is going to become a reality in the next couple of years, and going into 2030, maybe even cross and become more than 7.5 trillion economy. So under these circumstances, I think, why has the economy grown so fast? Most of us know about it, especially journalists would know about it. And so while we we ascribe the reason for this to rapid infrastructure development, ecosystem that is favorable to development of MSMEs, as also the ease of doing business that is responsible for investment in large industry, and also tax and fiscal reforms that have taken place over the last few years. However, we must not discount the importance that the digital revolution has played in all this. I think the digital revolution, the digital economy that India is today, is something that has seen an unprecedented surge in the consumption of electronic goods, smartphones, laptops, whatever appliances. They are found in all corners of the country now. Especially mobile phones are now to be found everywhere in the country, even in rural areas and in the panchayats and everywhere. But all this comes with a cost. It's indeed a crisis, not just a cost. It's indeed a crisis now. Why? Because India is now the third largest generator of e-waste globally, producing about 1.6 million tons of e-waste annually. And this, as we go to a $5 trillion economy, would double. It is estimated that the e-waste that we are producing would double. It would become more than 3 million tons in the next 3-4 years. So more than 80% of this is not being recycled scientifically. It is being handled by the informal sector, which is a cause of concern, because despite all the rules and regulations that we have, we still haven't been able to get institutions and infrastructure in place to be able to handle the kind of e-waste that is being generated across the country. So we need therefore to introspect as to where are we still lacking. So we have legislations and institutions in place. What legislation and institutions are necessary for driving e-waste management? We have that in place, but do we have the wherewithal to deal with this menacing amount of electronic waste? Do we have the means to be able to collect everything that the rules envisage? So while before 2011, there was no formal recognition of e-waste as a specific waste stream, and most of the collection was being done by informal scrap networks. The first rules that were notified by the government of India came out in 2011. It was a good start, because at least the roles of producers and recyclers and refurbishers and dismantlers was defined in those rules. However, over a period of time after those rules were notified, it was felt that they were not sufficient. In 2016, a revised version of the rules, a new set of rules were introduced, and I was also in my capacity as Environment Secretary of Sikkim, I was also one of the persons who was consulted and was involved in the discussion that preceded the formulation of these rules. And they were put out in the public domain, I think, for 2.5 months, and a lot of suggestions also came up. And a lot of them were included in the rules when it took final shape. What these rules, the 2016 rules, were a vast improvement over the ones that they replaced, the 2011 rules, and went beyond defining the roles of producers, dismantlers, and recyclers, and fixed responsibility for collection of e-waste on the producers, what is known as extended producer responsibility, or in short, EPR. It also expanded the different product categories and introduced the concept of PROs, because this was also a part of the discussion. The producer responsibility organizations were introduced within the rules itself. Why? Because the extended producer responsibility that was given to the producers and manufacturers, it was found that, and there were some feedbacks also that were received, that it was not practically possible for companies to deploy a collection mechanism in remote parts of the country, And there should be some intermediary agencies that would be able to take up this task on their behalf. And therefore, the producer responsibility organizations were defined, and they were formulated as an institution that would be able to form a bridge between producers and consumers to collect e-wastes that were generated in different parts of the country. So that's as far as the rules are concerned. It's now a good 9 years since the rules were notified. I think I'm not sure what's happening now, but every 10 years there is a review of the rules that is done by the ministry and in conjunction with the pollution control boards. And I think there might be some thought on a further revision. I'm not sure, but I think there might be there might be some more revision. For example, one area where I feel there ought to be a revision and incorporation in the rules is what we are talking about today. Producers are actually supposed to create awareness about the products that are about their products, about the ingredients that make up those products. They have to create awareness on how those products have to be handled once they reach the end of life, how they have to be handled even while they are in use, and all this has to be made aware through a booklet or something that goes with the product. This is being done, but is this enough? So what I feel is, because you and I, we know that when we buy some appliance, we buy a television set, for example, we get a booklet on which says that dispose it off wisely, and it might contain mercury, it might contain lead or whatever. But what do? We read it and then we just store it away along with the warranty card. We don't have a look at it. We don't give it a second thought. Now, and there are many, I think, maybe a majority of people who would not be interested to even look at that. And they wouldn't look at it in that even. And so I think there is a need, therefore, for producers and manufacturers to create awareness through advertisements in the media on a regular basis. Now, this is absolutely important, and I think this ought to be stipulated in the rules, that there ought to be a regular, maybe once in 6 months or something like that, a regular period over which the producers would be able to, they would advertise their products. When a new product comes out, you'll find celebrities advertising it all over the media and everywhere. But that's about the product, about the good things about the product. But what about the safety aspect of those products? Is it not necessary to advertise that and say that you have products like this, which are being used on an everyday basis? How do you handle them safely? Why is it necessary to handle them safely? Why is it necessary to dispose them off safely? What is the role of, what is harm that can be caused by chemicals, by elements like mercury, cadmium, and the other things, that the biphenyls and all that, which once they get into the environment, if the things are not disposed of scientifically, once they get into the environment, then it can cause a lot of health issues, neurological issues, respiratory issues, and other things. So I feel there should be some revision of the legislation that exists as on today. Now, the challenges that we face, I will not take a long time. Let me just dwell on 2 challenges, one of which I have already mentioned, which is the vastness of the e-waste generation landscape. Now, high-end equipment, mobile phones and laptops, pads, and all those high-end equipment, even the electronic goods that are used in the kitchen these days, they are probably restricted to just the metro cities or the 2 second-tier, third-tier cities. But then things like mobile phones and unbranded products, electronic products, the orphaned products, as they call it in the rules, they are to be found everywhere in all rural areas, or at least in most of the rural areas. And why is that? Because there is a migration of labor these days. There's migration in skilled people. They migrate all over the country. They go to other places to work because of rapid transportation and development of markets in small towns. Because of all that, now you will find mobile phones even in the most remote panchayats of our country. It is found everywhere. Now, who is responsible for collection of the e-waste that are generated in panchayat areas, in rural areas? The rules are silent. The unbranded or the orphan products the waste generated from them have to be collected by urban local bodies and maybe the panchayats. But how many of them are doing it? We do not know. Also, in states of the Northeast, for example, Sikkim is one of the northeastern states. And we had a particular problem that producers who are supposed to be in charge of the collection mechanism, who are supposed to set up collection centers, or who are supposed to deploy the PROs to facilitate collection of e-wastes produced from their products, they are not close by. They're not in the state, but they're not even close by. They're far away. The production centers are far away. It might be Gurgaon, or it might be Bangalore or Chennai. So production centers are far away. And it's inconceivable that producer based out of Bangalore would set up collection mechanisms in all of the northeastern states. It's inconceivable. And when I was chairman of the Pollution Control Board, I tried to address this. And I spoke to the Central Pollution Control Board and I said, look, since the rules provide that if producers are catering to more than one state, then it is the Central Pollution Control Board that should be responsible for making the EPR plans, or making setting up the stage for collection mechanism to be in place. They said, look, we'll forward names of companies and addresses of companies and the contact persons. Why don't you directly contact them? I mean, it doesn't work that way, because they say, and after this, we did contact a few, Samsung, and, even for solid waste, we contacted PepsiCo. They were dumping a lot of Lays in the state. We contacted Nestle. So, all of these people, what they said was, we've entrusted some PROs to do the collection. They are doing it. And some PROs did come to the state and they did start collecting things, but in a very superficial manner. It was not. They would do it in and around Gangtok, but what about the other parts of the state? So the vastness of the e-waste generation landscape is such that how would you address the problem, and how would you go about it? Then the second challenge that we face is the rapid obsolescence of technology. And Apple is very famous with every year they would come out with a new version of their phone. So there are many such electronic goods manufacturers who would constantly bring out new versions, and then the older version cannot be adapted. They would make it in such a way that you would be forced to buy a new version. You would have to discard the old version. So this also adds to the e-waste. There are many other challenges that we face with the informal cycle and the environmental hazards. We know of all that. So as I said, I think the major role that journalists can play here and media can play here is to generate awareness among the masses, because what I have found in a place even like Sikkim and even in Kerala, both of these states have high literacy, almost 10% literacy states, but the civic sense is lacking among the people, among a lot of people in these states. And when I travel out, from my house, there are certain isolated roads where I still find a lot of plastics that are thrown on the sides of the road. Sometimes it's very difficult to drive along that. So why is this happening? Because consumers are not aware of the problems of scientific waste generation. So this is where journalists come in. You need to not only generate awareness about the science of behind disposing of things scientifically, also dwell on the enforcement aspect. Where is the enforcement lacking? For example, the pollution control boards are not staffed enough to take up the responsibilities that they are burdened with under the rules, under the not just the e-waste management rules, but all the waste management rules. None of the state pollution control boards are sufficiently staffed. That's there. Then obviously the infrastructure gaps are there. Karo Sambhav also stepped into Sikkim to try and set up a collection center. There no collection center as such. I don't know what the situation is now, but when I was there, we tried very hard to set up collection centers. It's very difficult to convince producers to set up collection centers. How do you get around that problem? These are some of the challenges that we face. The task is daunting, but imperative to accomplish. So, I think I have dwelt on the subject sufficiently to give you food for thought. Let me wish all of you a good day and meaningful discussions. I'll stop here and hand the floor back to Mr. Mani. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandy, and thanks for, most importantly, the passion that is still there on the subject. The way, the kind of the way you talk, the way your body language clearly tells us that there's enormous amount of passion that is still there. And I wish, as a country, we are able to take your help in these matters. Thank you for taking us on the journey of the e-waste rules. In fact, in 2022, the new set of rules were released. And unfortunately, in that set of rules, the collection centers, which were earlier a mandate for the producers to have been taken out. So what has been happening is that none of the producers want to pay to operate a collection center. So in fact, what is happening is practically most of the collection centers are turning out to be unviable because people, you talked about the unorganized sector too. The unorganized sector is the best supply chain, the reverse supply chain. It's the world's best supply chain, I would say, for the reverse logistics perspective. And it works seamlessly without any written document or a process. I'm very particular about the written document piece of it, but it works brilliantly. It's whatever said and done. I'm a supply chain domain expert, and I'm amazed at the way it works. But having said that, so it is absolutely necessary. But unfortunately, what happens is that because of that being existing, collection centers run dry. And collection centers by themselves are not viable unless the producers or somebody steps up to support, to sponsor even part of it. So today the mandate is not there for the running of the collection centers. But still, we do operate collection centers all over the country from our own account. On the other side, we also, you pointed out about media, we do help brands to create awareness a couple of times a year. So we do go to the print, we do digital, and in fact, we do run about 250 stakeholder programs every year, physical, face-to-face ones. But then definitely the media friends that are on the call here can play a huge role in helping build this entire ecosystem. The civic sense that you talked about help build that too. So thank you very much for your thoughts and your experience, Dr. Chandy, and thank you very much for all the service that you've done to us. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
I will move on and move it past to the panel now. I think we might stretch the call a little bit because I'm waiting to hear what the media friends have to say. I'm sure there are some exciting, very interesting, very, very meaningful information and stories that they have to say, and also give us views on how we can take this whole thing forward. I will introduce Shivangi, and then Shivangi can take it forward from there. Shivangi has an experience over 7 years in this field. She leads the project office in Karo Sambhav, which means we all are scared of her. She waxes around with a stick and then gets us moving. In anything which which is all from collection systems or critical metal recovery projects or hard to recycle solutions, you name it. When I'm not going to keep reading out all that she does, but then you can see that how we all keep running before she comes and catches us. So Shivangi, that's what she is, and she's an MSc from Terry on the environmental sciences side, and she has done an MSc chemistry from Gargi College. But somewhere in this life or in the previous life, she was an engineer somewhere. So she buggers my happiness in all my engineering and my design principles and everything. So, media friends, that's the moderator for you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Over to you, Shivangi.
Thank you, Mani, for that very, very colorful introduction. Welcome, everyone, to our sixth episode this season. I think our previous speakers have already covered not only why e-waste is an important topic to talk about, but also why journalists specifically play such an important role in making sure that we have the information not just as is presented, but someone is diving a little deeper into seeing how these threads are connecting between the policy part of it, the implementation, the enforcement, what the general public actually requires. So I'll move on to introducing our panelists for today. We have Mr. Pankaj Mishra, who's a journalist and co-founder of Factor Daily. He has spent over 2 decades telling stories that create deep personal connections across India's most influential newsrooms, from the Economic Times to Mint to TechCrunch and the Times of India. His Outliers podcast began in sound and traveled into words, shaping his book Against the Grain. Our second speaker is Ms. Simrin Sirur, who's a staff writer at Mongbe, India. She is a Delhi-based journalist who reports on environment, climate, energy, and policy. She's worked with Mongbe, India, and previously The Print, focusing on the climate impacts and biodiversity and environmental governance related issues. Mr. Aroon is our third speaker today, who's the principal correspondent at The Hindu. He, as the principal correspondent, covers the latest developments and trends in Indian tech policy and telecom. He has over 3 years of experience in journalism, having previously worked as a journalist at Media Nama and senior correspondent at Intrac, where he reports on the big tech firms, censorship, and regulations within India. And last but definitely not the least, Ms. Sneha Bhura, who's assistant editor at Times of India. She loves exploring stories at the intersection of culture and technology. She's also a published poet and podcaster, and her debut poetry collection, Velvet Grapes, was released in 2020. Welcome to all the panelists today. So, as Mani introduced sometime earlier, this is going to be more of a question and answer sort of a panel discussion. And I definitely have a lot of questions because one aspect that Dr. Thomas covered was how vast the topic of electronic waste is, not only from a scientific perspective, but also from a social engineering perspective, from a information flow perspective. So I want to ask our panelists today, how easy or difficult have you found e-waste to cover as a concept?
Yeah, I can go.
Yes, Pankaj, please.
Yeah, so the first time I looked at e-waste was in 2016, and it was very tough in the sense that, and that is something I want to share today. Um, I think, at least I can speak for myself, journalism needs to go deeper in different domains. So my biggest challenge was just understanding e-waste itself. Because in my mind it was very sketchy. And that is when I partnered with good friends at Toxic Links. I spent actually a lot of time with Pranshu at Karo Sambhav just to understand it. And then I went to this place called Seelampur, where I stayed for 2 days and reported a story. The point I'm trying to make is even now I don't understand it, if that's the question. And I think this is the even since 2016 to now, if you ask me, this is the biggest narrative challenge, not just for the newsrooms, but also for other stakeholders in this ecosystem. One is the language that you all use, right? And by language, I mean the way you use terms. in e-waste, the grammar that you use. So I feel personally, because I look at my job as understanding something and then taking it in a shape that people can relate with or understand. That's a big challenge. So I think that is number one. Uh, we need deeper partnerships with civil society and with people who understand this domain well. This is not an isolated newsroom conversation, and I've seen it in most of the newsrooms. It doesn't happen that way. It can't be tracked through the policy or legislative lens when it comes to bringing narrative shift. The final point is, it is absolutely essential to look at this as a long-term project and not, okay, so a new legislation or something has come, so okay, so let's go and report about it. This is one of the topics that needs a sustained coverage, because I've been to Selampur again, and I feel needle has not moved at all. So I don't know, but these are some sketchy top thoughts that come to my mind.
No, absolutely, Pankaj. And you have also covered Selampur in a few of your articles, sort of seeing how that entire area was at one point in time and how it has progressed over the years. On the language aspect, though, Simran, I know you have written on when the 2022 rules came out, you had written on what the rules would mean for the industry at large, for e-waste management within India. And sorry? Yeah, I said Simran. Sorry, my team member was just correcting on something. But yes, so Simran, I wanted to get your views as well on what Pankaj said regarding the kind of language that is used when a lot of this policy documents are made, and how, again, easy or difficult are they to interpret when it comes to just general application and for a normal consumer to understand.
Yeah, can you hear me? I
Yes,
hope I'm
yes, we
audible.
can.
All right, thank
Yes.
you so much for inviting me to be on this panel. I think, yeah, a big piece of that is also some of the jargon that comes with the idea of circularity, right? Like extended producer responsibility being the big one. I don't think most people understand what that means, because it is a very heavy term. Who's the producer? What is the responsibility? And how does that kind of work? And so I think, yeah, communicating those aspects of policy can always be challenging. And I do remember reporting in 2022 when those rules had come out, because there were changes to how the collection of waste, particularly e-waste, was changing with the new edition, with the from 2016 to 2022. And yeah, communicating why these changes matter to the layperson is kind of difficult when already e-waste is, it's one of those things where everybody has that question with, what do I do with my laptop? What do I do with my phone? Unlike with solid waste management, there's a reliable, dependable system that exists. But with e-waste, that system doesn't exist at all. And so when you're talking about changes to producer responsibility, to first kind of talk about who the producer is, what their responsibility is, and then how that has changed and how that impacts the way that the waste is recycled, was a little bit challenging. And what I tried to drive home in that story was what's already been talked about before, which was the removal of collection centers. Because even though in the older framework, those collection centers were still kind of invisible, not very well known, it's still such an important component to have, right? To make it the producer's responsibility to have those centers there. Yeah, because they have the ability to do that. And yeah, communicating that then is the next step. But yeah, that was sort of my experience with covering that story.
Thank you, Simran. Actually, on the topic of collection centers, or on the topic of communicating a lot of this information and understanding what the implications of this are, one of the things that we, for example, learned is how important how important a part policy plays in making sure some of these things are explicitly spelled out and not left implicit. for example, the collection aspect of e-waste, because even for producers, after a point in time, it starts becoming difficult for them to then explain why collection centers are important if it's not explicitly written in the policy alone, right? Because then they have to also educate someone within their system to go like, no, we need to spend money on this because this needed. So there are certain aspects of electronic waste management that even when we have been talking to stakeholders, we have realized we hadn't thought about that angle at all. I want to know if from any of the panelists, if there are certain angles about e-waste that you think don't get spoken about as much. There are certain topics that we usually commonly hear about, but in your experience, not only researching but also writing about this topic, there must be some things that you've come across or some thought processes you have come across that where you were like, okay, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Hi, can I speak?
Yes, Sneha, please.
Again, thank you for having me today. I'm Sneha and I work with the Sunday team of Times of India. And we usually do news features, long form news features. So while I do have the advantage of, writing long form narrative pieces, I still wish there was more time to dig deeper, and something as intense and heavy as e-waste did require a lot of just to understand the language of the sector was a bit of a time consuming process. But after that, I straight away had to jump into the earth recovery aspect of e-waste without really, let's say, one of our panelists spoke about how he spent a lot of time on one of his early stories, and he stayed in Ceylon for 2 days. And I realized in a daily I don't have that much time to spend to actually understand the full life cycle. I remember one of the things that I grappled with, and one of the things which I also realized is not much explored in the mainstream media is different recycling companies making claims about how their proprietary technology works the best in rare earth recovery with full efficiency. And I, as a journalist, I don't want to sound too naive and believe everything that the company is saying, but then I also don't want to misrepresent their work. Uh, I think that area is something that, one of the speakers in my story, one of the voices in my story on rare earth recovery spoke about how there is a need for material audits, just like you have financial audits. So I feel the aspect more in stories with a greater investigative rigor as to what what is the extent of rare earth element recovery that is actually happening from e-waste, the amount, the percentage, who is checking, where is it going, exactly, whether, again, one of the recyclers, they said off the record that, do not mention that we are getting better rates in Europe, and we don't want to sell some of these semi-finished products in India, because the downstream processes are not going to give us good value, because we spend so much time and effort in extracting these let's say permanent magnets. So I think yeah, there is that I wish there was more being written about how much of when we talk about e-waste and rare earth recovery, I'm just talking about a very niche aspect, area of e-waste. What is the kind of accountability journalism that is being done?
I think a very, 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 very important point, Sneha, that you brought up is one is understanding the language that is being spoken, and second is verifying the content of what is being spoken. Just checking the validity of uh, the kind of policy that is being made and the implementation that is being done. And actually, Aroon, I will directly address this next question to you, because I know you've written
Shivangi,
about yes.
if I
Mani?
can interrupt here, when I'm
Yes, yes.
kind of very happy to hear what Sneha said, and we would be very happy if somebody does a complete investigative journalistic work, any of you or your colleagues, whoever, and she talked about the recycling and what is coming out of the recycling facilities which is available,
Yes.
etc., and what they actually do and what comes out of it. On one side, yes, there is this fact about what this e-waste, how is it really being collected. We claim that there is about 70% of e-waste that's being collected across the country in a year, etc., etc. Now, is it truly being done, etc.? That is one side of the material, the e-waste being collected scenario. On the other side is the actual recycling scenario. Now, where is the recycling happening? Is it truly happening? Is everybody who claims to be a recycler a recycler? Now, if that will be, I mean, that will really be awesome if something like that comes up. So, Sneha, thanks for that kind of a thought. And whichever way, as a recycler, I wouldn't want to be the person who will do it, but then whichever way we can be of any help to you in them, something like that, because we want it to be an absolutely neutral, unbiased report by one of you or maybe even all of you together. If something like that happens, that will really be brilliant. That's all I would say. Sorry, I'll stop there. Go ahead, Shivangi.
Oh, thank you, Mani, for summarizing. I wanted to say something similar and along those lines as well, because it is very, very important to make sure that whatever information is coming out is not only verifiable but also reliable in nature. And it, on one side, we have the aspect of making the policy. Okay, we have made the policy, we have certain numbers coming in, but whether those numbers are rooted in reality or not are very, very important, especially when we start considering from a material perspective. Like Sneha mentioned, having these material audits, very important when Ministry of Mines, for example, has such a clear focus on critical material recovery and on making India more and more self-reliant when it comes to these minerals. So it actually starts moving from a problem that we are taking care of to an opportunity that we need to make sure we are capitalizing on completely. Because if it's just restricted to compliance aspect of it, there might still be a scope or a possibility for people to fudge numbers. But the moment you start moving to actual tangible material that is needed then into manufacturing, the chain becomes much longer and much more difficult to then not have the actual content there, not have the material in hand to do all of these things actually. That still though leads me for my next question to Aroon actually, because Aroon, I know you had written about the gaps that are there currently in the system from various aspects. If you could just cover those gaps that you had identified in light of the fact that not only in terms of the conversations that are there in and around circularity and e-waste, both from the perspective of the terminologies that are used, but also from the perspective of jargon, as Simran had pointed out, is used. But considering the fact that we are slowly moving from a space of, okay, we need to do compliance, then we need to take care of e-waste, to a space of we need material, we need critical raw materials as much as we can. E-waste is an excellent source for it. So in those lights, how do you see the gaps that you had previously identified sit now?
Right. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really sorry I missed a lot of the first half of this session. I was tuned into Mr. Chandy's argument, and it's always striking to me how passionate the people who have been working in this sector often for decades are about this subject matter. Now, I feel like this is, I think the article that you cited was back a couple years ago when the ICA put out a report on the kind of potential that e-waste has in our economy. Now, I think, as far as the kind of gaps go, I think this is one of those supply chains where gaps define kind of the whole, in the sense of where we need like robust processes and kind of systems in place to do things. You often find that there is either not something or there's a shell of something, right? Which makes it a really kind of difficult space to track, because you could have things, for example, like crackdowns on ghost processing centers or ghost collection centers, and you would still struggle to get that across and register as an improvement in the overall situation, right? Now, I will clarify that I'm an aspirational attendee to this session because I haven't covered, the e-waste and circular economy more than 2 or 3 times. And while I'm thankful to have had the chance to do that in a long format, like in explainers or in our longer reporting, I want to also, as a journalist, speak to what I feel like cuts to the narrative of this ecosystem. Now, the problem with something like me, I'm a day-to-day news reporter at our national bureau here in New Delhi. And one problem that we have is that we have to sacrifice some things for the greater, narrative strand of what happens every day. For instance, in telecom, I'm very interested in what goes on with the optical transceiver industry. But obviously, since every day there is something or the other that the department is doing, that individual telcos are doing, there are ways in which I would like to cover some subcategories of the industry that forever feel like they are slipping away. And similarly with the circular economy, the problem is that the circle has two parts. And one is the forward kind of supply chain, which is something that the government is like investing a lot of energy in terms of building, whether it is manufacturing semiconductors or getting the component supply chain going, right? And that there you have like already we are one subtype down, and it is something where I was in Sanand for the launch of CG Semi's kind of semiconductor plant. I was just in Mohali for the announcement of SCL, the semiconductor lab in Mohali, opening up. Now, the forward thing is much more easy to digest for a day-to-day person, because there you have like concrete targets that you better achieve, right? But with the circular economy, you always have potential, right? And so unless you see something where you feel like, okay, there is something here that might happen in a couple of years that we should really look out for, the kind of priorities really start battling each other. And one thing that I think is not covered in terms of gaps, I think, is the kind of policy versus reality gap. I mean, we know the refrain of the informal kind of economy kind of just thriving without finding that much of a semblance in the official documentation. And I mean, obviously that's a theme that comes across in a lot of government policy making, right? You have people in Delhi doing things that are not at all indicative of what is actually happening. But I mean, if a lot of what I would like to see in terms of policy is something that allows us to grapple onto a narrative strand. Now, that makes me selfish as a journalist, because obviously I want to be able to tell this story, right? And I want more opportunities to tell this story. But the last time I tried, I was really looking into the litigation that was going on in the Delhi High Court with a lot of OEMs kind of going against the EPR mandate. And it just, it's difficult to kind of grab onto a narrative strand that you can then sell to a mainstream audience. If I were a financial reporter, I feel like I would have kind of really been able to do blow-by-blows of things in the circular economy space, because obviously it has long-term significance. It has a lot of moving parts that you can look at, but it is also something that has to kind of coalesce into something more kind of presentable, if I may say so, before we can get there. So those are largely the kind of gaps I would talk about.
I think
So, on that last piece, is it not possible to say that, hey, these guys are not wanting to pay for their sins? And wouldn't that be a kind of a very sensitive thing to kind of take upon and get a platform?
That's half the reason I'm here. Thank you for that idea.
Thank you. Anyway, sorry, Shivangi, I am killing your discussion.
I will be in touch.
No, I think the narrative strands part of it is very, very important, because that's partly not only an incentive or a driver for a journalist as well. It motivates the higher ups in the news streams, because that is what is then motivating consumers to also read about things. One interesting thought that comes to my mind, though, on that topic is one is prioritization of narrative strands between, okay, within this industry, X is happening, I want to focus on Y itself. But within the strands of circular economy or within the strands of e-waste management itself, do you see a shift happening of sorts where the narrative has slowly shifted away from the social issues or the environmental issues that usually plague, or not even say plague, are the core issues that were initially sought out to be solved, and that focus has slowly shifted almost very extensively towards, okay, there is a lot of material that can, I just called CRM recovery an opportunity from e-waste, which remains true, but I do think there is a shift in the narrative of in terms of what is being the focus right now. The focus is more and more towards we can take out XYZ things, whereas the reality of e-waste is you can't take out everything. There will be things that cannot be recovered, and those do need to be handled somewhere. There will be aspects where, in one form or the other, the informal sector or the underprivileged sector, all of these unregulated sections of the economy will remain a part of it, but the issues that are prevalent there do not then get talked about a lot. I would like the panel's thoughts on that.
I mean, if I may jump in there, it's just that you're absolutely bang on in the sense that there is now a shift to the kind of strategic importance of, the e-waste management, in the sense that, you are not just talking about environmental damage. It is, in fact, about maybe even something like, buffering ourselves against a deterioration in relations with China at some point in the future, which is a really dramatic shift for like a piece of discourse to take. So that has been really interesting to see.
Can I speak?
Yes, Sneha.
Yeah, so I do because I mean, to be very honest and upfront about it, it's not like I've looked at e-waste stories in depth over a period of time. But yes, having done this one particular story most recently on rare earth recovery and this whole geopolitical drive towards, outsmarting China and how best to harvest all the minerals that are there in our e-waste, it's like e-waste is no longer waste, it's like a resource. The waste narrative is moving towards urban mining and how much you can extract. That extractive logic is obviously a lot more at play at this point. And then there was this thing at the back of my mind that you basically want people to be more mindful about how to discard their end of life electronics or keep recycling it and not generate more waste. But then how are you going to get all the rare earth elements that you talk about if there is if the recyclers are saying, oh, we don't get enough waste, we don't have access to enough waste, there is this contradiction of sorts where the more e-waste you generate, the more of a pool you have to tap into to extract minerals. And I just found that very funny because I mean, obviously that's not how it usually plays out. You're not going to get it's not so inversely proportional or directly proportional to so yeah, I mean, I would as a journalist would like to actually think about more in terms of how products are designed. It's not just like how at the end of the life when you design a product, it should be more modular, or like in the beginning there was this talk of giving a manual on how to discard it properly, not just a user manual. So some of these important things are getting lost in the narrative, which is
Thank you, Sneha. Pankaj, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to mention two elephants in the room. Right? The first is, I think, the lens through which we are looking at this whole e-waste, tracking of it, making sense of it, and all of that. And I think, in my experience, I think what I have realized is it's a much deeper socio, cultural fabric and political as well in many of these times, right? And I think that is where a lot of narrative is getting lost, because this has become a very niche thing to talk about. This has become something. Okay, there are these minerals being talked about. There are these policies being talked about. But I think if you ask me personally, the lens that we need to flip is there, and that intersection where politics, socio-cultural fabric. If you walk in Selampur or any of those places, you will see it yourself. It's a lived experience. You go to Moradabad, you will see that. You go to all these places, and I'm sure people who work in this, you've been seeing this. So I see that as a missed opportunity. Uh, uh,
Pankaj, I think we've lost you a little bit. Hello.
Yeah, Pankaj is on a train, so I guess you pick it up from there, Shivangi, and then when he comes back and we can have him again.
Yes, absolutely. But again, a very, very important point in terms of what lens are we talking about whenever we are looking at e-waste management. And I think it also depends on what context we are talking in, because if you're talking in the context of, say, I'm a company, I want to design certain things, I might be thinking from the perspective purely of materials, right? Because I need to make sure I have some access or some visibility of where my material is coming from. But if I'm a policymaker or if I'm a general citizen, my interests might be a lot more inclined towards the social aspects of things, or the people aspect of who are the people that are working in these situations and how that can be resolved. Because I think one thing that Pankaj brought up was that the conversations around whether or not e-waste is an opportunity and how much of an opportunity it is, the fact that the more e-waste we create, paradoxically, we also have a lot more opportunity to extract minerals from that. But it also then is a problem unless we do go and collect that and recycle it, is the constant aspect of that if not touched, if not handled, if not managed, it will remain a problem. And not just because we are losing materials, not just because it's creating pollution, but also because by its very existence, it is supporting an entire ecosystem, which, as Mani put it, as a veteran of supply chain enthusiasm, an excellent supply chain, but one which is not regulated, one which is not overseen. And it's very, very important for those aspects to come in, because without
Maybe
that, we
Pankaj is
can't
back, I guess.
control the
Yeah,
social aspects of things. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm patchy network, but the point I'm
Yes.
trying to make is it's human life we are talking about, and I think
Yes.
as long
Yes.
as we are going to treat this like what we are discussing now, I'm sorry to say that it will continue to be this. And
Mm.
the moment
Absolutely.
we bring that, because I felt it, I saw it. The boy Aman, the first time I met him, he was 9 year old, right? Now, if you are going to bring this narrative shift towards the point where the people's lives are going, I mean, what are we doing? So even if you talk to me as a journalist, that is my interest. I don't
Mm.
care if I understand the extraction. I don't care if I can understand all the policy and regulatory changes. My lens is that on the ground. There is someone who is losing life. The water tables are getting screwed up. The whole, the materials that are, the whole Selampur Nala, you go to any of those rivers, right?
Oh, God.
Rivers are dying. So I think the
Yeah.
narrative shift is very, very essential. And that I feel is where things are failing. And the more we stay this way, it will continue to be this.
That is
So
very,
actually, there are
very true.
two sides to that coin there, Pankaj. Honestly, because while you say that, at the same time, it's a survival. It's a survival for that entire group of people that are working in that unorganized sector. Now, how are we? While the narrative is one side, and we're talking about extraction, metals, what we're losing, etc., etc. I know I am sitting on the organized side of the spectrum and talking about it, but yet, I think what we need should not lose sight of is the entire survival attitude that we need that's there for the people that are working on it. Sorry, I think we are not
I
hearing from
think
Simran, so I'll just shut.
one thing I would like to add, though, Mani, is also something that Aroon had said that stuck with me was some of these conversations are also easier to do because when we just move it to materials, we're no longer talking about a very, very difficult and complicated topic that cannot be easily and immediately solved. right? When we are talking just about materials, we can quantify it, we can create targets for it, and it's a much more positive story, so to say. But yes, very, very important to keep in mind that no matter how difficult the story is to not only think about, investigate, write about, and read, it is nonetheless a very, very critical aspect of waste management that will not go away unless we actively go and solve that.
Yeah. Sorry, can we hear from Simrin? Yeah.
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to jump in and kind of talk about a little bit, build on what everybody's sort of said. I feel like when I look at e-waste stories, there is a lot that talks about the people who are dismantling it and the health impacts of it. And what's so disheartening to know is that none of that is really factored into how e-waste recycling is valued, right? So it's one thing to value the material, and it's another thing to value the process of extracting that material. And I think the policy, both the 2016 rules and the 2022 rules, do not engage with the informal sector at all, right? There's no regulatory engagement or interaction with the informal sector, which I think, and Pankaj, you should correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like without any engagement or inclusion, having the sector stay marginalized, I mean, it's just easier to continue the status quo that way. And so I think one way in which regulators can at least kind of try to change this status quo is to make an effort to really include the informal sector in some way, and have some sort of conversation. And the second is to, how do we properly value e-waste and everything that goes behind the extraction of e-waste? Because, I mean, right now there is this litigation in the High Court, and I think it was the first time that it was publicly revealed that some of these companies pay 7 rupees, right? I think Hitachi is the only company that it's come up to light that they pay 7 rupees per kilo for e-waste recycling. And I think there's no transparency as to what is the real cost of recycling, what is the real cost of recycling safely, and what is the real cost of recycling equitably. And I think that's a conversation that I think us in the media can also start to have.
Sorry, Shivangi, I'm going to kick it up a little bit. I'm sorry. Thanks, Simran, for splitting that up into the material and the process side of the whole thing. And yes, you are right. When somebody is saying 7, and I'm not wanting to take brand names, it's not that one brand that you talked about. There are these whole host of large brands are working at that number or less than that number. And we wonder how they manage to do it, because it doesn't, even if I start looking at my cost of moving material at a national level, the logistics cost alone is coming to almost that number. Okay, so now let me not talk more about it, because then this entire conversation will go on a completely different track. But yes, this is something that needs to be worked out in terms of the process that you talked about. How do we, while we try on one side to bring in the unorganized sector, we work with them, we engage with them, and we kind of move them from what is informal to a formal side to the best possible by ourselves, and on a day-to-day basis try and work with them. We are sometimes harassed by the regulators themselves, especially when it comes to GST and such like, okay, who end up asking us as to why do you work with them. So there's one side of the regulators or the government, for instance, which tells us, please find ways and means of engaging with them, work with them, and we go actually work with them. And we do a lot of work with them for that matter. The other side, there are other sections of the government which harasses us for something that happens there. Now, what am I expected to do? Okay, so there has to be some kind of policy somewhere. People have to come together and have a clarity about what they want us to do, or what they want to even achieve in terms of both the material, extraction of the material, as well as the process, and involving everybody that is in the process who is currently trying to survive that 9-year-old that Pankaj talked about, who's trying to survive over there, or even a 7-year-old who's also there, who's trying to survive over there. How do we help them survive? But is that the right thing to do? Is a different question. It's an elephant on the table, but then let me not go there. But the fact is, how do we do and what do we do is the question. Anyway, sorry, I think I have done enough for today. I'll just hand it over to you, Shivangi, and be quiet after that.
No. I think very important point that you brought up, Mani, because whenever we talk about gaps within e-waste management, I think one small aspect of this, a very critical, very important aspect of this is also how a lot of the times there's some dissonance between what one arm of the regulators are saying versus what the other arm is saying. And I think that is where the entire, I think, idea of today's webinar also came in from, that someone needs to go and ask these questions from different lenses, from different narrative structures. But this needs to be done because these questions need to be dug into continuously. And this information needs to come from different sources so that it can be independently then verified as well, or independently be considered reliable in nature. With that, actually, I would love to go on. I have so many more questions. I have a list of 10 questions and I barely asked 2. But unfortunately, we are towards the end of our webinar. I would really, really like to thank, first and foremost, all of our panelists, because I genuinely do want to keep the webinar going, but my colleague in front of me is like doing a big cross no because we are over time, unfortunately. So we hope that all of you continue your incredible work in this space, and we look forward to hearing from you on your thoughts. We look forward to reading whatever pieces any of the panelists come out with or your colleagues come out with. Any way we can help, please feel free to reach out. We would like to thank our program sponsors, Apple, Dell Technologies, Canon India, Cisco, Ericsson, Tejas Networks, Boat, and Nothing for supporting the program, for helping us create this platform where these conversations can happen. I'm foregoing the question and answer section because, again, in the interest of time, we'll have to close the webinar now. But I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful day. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, and appreciate everything, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
evening.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks so much.